All right, you guys can have a seat. Well, good morning, everybody. Good to see all of you guys. If this is your first time here at Hill City, my name is John Wagler. I'm part of this team and grateful that you are here with us, and we hope that Hill City becomes a place that you can call home. And we always want people to have a home church. We believe everyone in Richmond should have a home church. Well, actually, technically everywhere, but we want you to have a home church and a place where you can connect with Jesus and connect with other people. And of course, we hope that this is the place for you. But if for some reason it isn't, we'd love to help you connect with another church here in town and to help grow your faith and grow your community. But grateful that you are here this morning. I also want to just say thank you for your generosity. Every week we have an opportunity. We've talked a lot about our generosity over the last couple months because we're obviously raising money for this building and all the renovations, and some of you guys have hopped in on there and appreciate that, and we want others to do the same thing. But also the consistent generosity that you guys have shown helps us help people all the time. And so we have stories every single week of our ability to just step in and help people in our community because of your incredible generosity. So I always want you to not only trust where your money goes, but also trust that it's helping people all the time in our city. So thank you so much for being a part of that. We've been showing these stories, except last week when I forgot to actually show the story. But we've been showing these stories almost every single week for the last several months. And this is another great one from Stephanie, just talking about what has started to happen in her heart and how God has been transforming her life. And so let's take a look at Stephanie's story here this morning.
I grew up in a family that was very chaotic. It was definitely what you would call a traumatic childhood with all the things you would expect. Abuse, a lot of infidelity back and forth with my parents, and kind of creating a very unstable foundation. God was just not present. It wasn't something that anyone was thinking about because it just felt like everyone was in survival mode. I just sort of hung on for a long time through my young adulthood, but knew something was wrong. So I, started seeking therapy. I gotta have some therapy. I gotta get better. Self-help, reading, therapists, work, and I got better. I did. I got better, but there was still just this when I remember myself, I kind of remember I was hanging on, and just fingers were just kind of slipping. I did this for years, and finally, when I was in my mid-40s, I just kind of experienced this moment of complete turmoil. And when that happened, something changed. I started seeking. I had done so much work and so much work and so much work and so much work. And I had gotten better, but there was something missing. There was some emptiness, and I started seeking. That's when I really started questioning about what's in the universe. What is there? What am I missing? There's something missing. There's something more. I had a really bad night, and I just found myself kind of on my knees in the kitchen, just saying, I can't do this anymore. My way does not work. I need your help. And after that, started a real relationship with Christ. What I said before, I worked and I worked and I worked and I did therapy and I read the books and I tried to recognize my mistakes and do things differently, and I got better. But I only got so much better until I put Christ into the mix. In Exodus, God talks about the sins of the father falling on generation after generation after generation. For so long, I felt responsible for that. But when you start reading the Gospels, Paul says, therefore there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, that we're freed from the laws of sin and death. You do not have to drag the chains of generational sin behind you if you don't want to. And when you are in Christ, you are free from that. And you know what you're responsible for. And if you know what you're responsible for, there's freedom. Christ revealed to me, Jesus revealed to me, you never belonged to them. You belong to me.
So good. So good. Thankful for these testimonies, thankful for these videos and people sharing and the vulnerability with it. And what Stephanie was sharing there was like, at the core, she's talking about relationships and broken relationships in her past and her family, but also restored relationship through Jesus, and what that began to transpire and how it began to really shift generational elements in her life. And so this summer, we are spending time talking about relationships and calling it Summer Lovin. I said last week we're doing Summer Lovin because this is the time, as a teenager where like all the relationships start. Summer camps are some of the best memories that people can have, and so much love happens at summer camps. And so we wanted to talk about Summer Lovin', this in different components and aspects and elements of like, what does it mean to really have healthy relationships? And so last week, we started off talking about it this way and showing you that this is you, right? This is someone else. Here's what's happening in all of our relationships. I'll give you some muscles. How about that? So you can feel a little bit better there. Here's what happens in every single relationship that you have, an interaction that you have. You are looking at this person wondering, what do you think of them? And then you're wondering, what do they think of you? And then you have this going on in your own head. What do I think of myself, right? And at the same time, you're like, what does God think of me? Or what do I think about God? Whoops. And let me go back here. See if I can go back. It's going to be gone. Watch. Yep. Here's what happened. Don't worry about that. Here's what happened. You have 5 things going on. How you see the person across from you, how you think they see you, what do you think about yourself, how you think about God, and then what you think God thinks about you. That is the case in every single interaction you have with people and how you think about any kind of relationship you have. It's happening all the time. Even when you think to yourself, is it really true, what I think about God? I don't even believe in God at all. It's still, the point is you think about something bigger, something that's out there, that's shaping something around you. And so that's intact with all your relationships. And it's important to understand, in these moments, why they're so sacred. In these moments, why it matters. In these moments, why it's so complicated. How many of you guys have complicated relationships? Yeah, right? What's going on there? It's all those things are factoring in at the same time. And so we wanted that to start off. And we also showed you this last week, this idea of the emotional cycle of change. There's a lot up here. And here's why this stuff is important, because if we really want transformative experiences in relationships, if we really want to be in a place where you can change, where you can have this stuff happen, we all start off in this moment where we're super optimistic. All right, so it's I used the example last time of when you were really young and you fell in love, let's say, and you're really optimistic, and then you kind of go into this place where you start getting you get pessimistic and then despair to want to stay in here. And then, but how do I get change out of this? What does it look like? You need vision in your life. You need a way to begin to engage. It's like, oh, I want to be committed to these things, have integrity around these things, have a real vision that allows me to move towards change. Because here's what will happen. If you don't have a vision for your life, in every single relationship that you're in, if you don't have a strong vision of where you want to go, you will inevitably go like this. You'll have some sort of like uninformed optimism, but you'll say this, but I've done this before. I've seen this before. Some of you guys that have been in relationships, and you'll say things like this, I'm stuck, or this is the way it always happens in my relationships, and this is what we talked about last week. This is the way it always happens in my relationships. And it's like, nah, you don't have any real vision for your relationships. That's what's happening. And so you keep going back to this place of pessimism and despair. That's where you constantly end up. But there's a way to get out of that. There's a way to not be stuck. You need vision, and a Christ-centered vision for your life. The passage that we looked at last week will be the same one that we're going to look at here this morning. And so if you are able, will you stand for today's reading? Again, we're going to be in the same passage out of Matthew 22, which is Jesus is interacting with some of the religious teachers at that time when they begin to question who he is. It says, hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment?" Jesus replies, "To love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these two commandments." Amen? You can be seated. I want you to see that when Jesus says this whole thing about the second command there about love your neighbor as yourself, sometimes we forget that we are supposed to love ourselves. And so sometimes like the greatest deterrent from us having healthy relationships is like the fact that we don't love ourselves. And understand that that's part of what Jesus is saying here. Like in order for you to actually love your neighbor well, you have to love yourself well. And how do you love yourself well? It's, well, we see ourselves in light of how Jesus sees us. And that becomes the crux, even what Stephanie was talking about and what we talked about last week. Coming into this week, I thought I was going to talk about submission, because everyone loves talking about submission. And that's actually going to be next week. We're going to do that and change my mind. And I want to take on something lighter this week. So figure we talk about the global crisis that we're in and the new world order. And like, how do we respond as people in time of crisis? Okay, this is a really big hinge point relationally that I'm seeing with folks like of all generations and how we interact with each other around times like this. You can look out into the world and you can see there's crisis and there's a lot that's happening around us. There's been a lot that's been going on in different ways. You know, the conversation around immigration, what's happening with ICE everywhere in our country, and people have different perspectives around like what should be happening and everything else. But there's a piece of this that you're seeing this and reading articles about situations happening in churches now, people getting pulled out, or at schools and on playgrounds and different things. And it's like, what is happening in our country? It doesn't mean there shouldn't be rules and legal stuff and all that stuff. I'm for all those things, but it's just like, there's a crisis happening with image bearers in our country and in our world. There's a crisis that's happening. And how are we responding? And how are we seeing? And how are we talking about it? And how are we relationally in all of this? When you see war happening and things happening globally with Iran and Israel and our involvement and other countries being involved, it's like, how are we responding in all of this? Because there is a way that we as Christians, if we are to love the Lord our God with all of our heart and with all of our soul and all of our mind, and if we're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves, it's how are we responding? How are we helpful to people who don't know Jesus? What kind of perspective are we sharing there? And how are we talking? What are the words coming out of our mouths? Like, what is it actually like? What do we believe in the midst of all of this? It's not just those two things. There's plenty of other things going on, like even in our own city, even crazy interviews happening. I don't know, some of you guys might have seen the Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson interview. You have like all these like things that like seem wild, they seem crazy, like what's transpiring. You have all of that on a larger scale, and then at the same time, I was thinking about this week, just kind of pastorally in conversations with people that have seen like tragic deaths happen, family members or teenagers a couple of significant deaths have happened to teenagers in our community. It's like, who are we in these situations? When crisis hits, who are we? And crisis hits, like, who do we want to be? When crisis hits, like, what are the words that come out of our mouth? Like, what perspective are we sharing with other people? When crisis hits, who are we? Are we the people that love like crazy? That are clearly showing that we love God with all of our heart, with all of our soul, and all of our mind, and that we are loving our neighbors as ourselves? Is that who we are? When I was thinking about crisis, I wrote down this phrase: crisis tests our vision, exposes our character, and reveals the belief that is shaping our narrative. So whenever we hit crisis, whenever we see crisis, it exposes something in us. It exposes like what's at the depth of our being. It exposes a belief that's at the center, that's shaping the narrative that we're putting out there publicly. It's shaping, or externally, it's shaping the narrative that we're like internalizing as well. It's like, what's the belief that's actually there, that's shaping all of this? And you see it, and you hear it, and you know it. When crisis hits, that's what begins to happen. See, we will rise or fall to the level of our preparation of crisis. So sometimes maybe you guys have felt this, that like, man, you just kind of like, we're just going through life and all of a sudden crisis hit and things fell apart. It fell apart for you emotionally. It fell apart for you spiritually. It fell apart for you relationally. Well, why did that happen? Why did things fall apart? There was a belief that was shaping the narrative there. There was a lack of preparation for what could be. There was a lack of integrity surrounding some of those things. The foundation wasn't strong enough. And we see in those moments, like we get exposed in those moments. We will reach to, when crisis hits, whenever you guys go through crisis. So if you're in the room right now, I don't care how old or young you are, if you have not been through crisis yet, just know it's coming. I'm not saying that as like a bearer of bad news. It's just like, this is life. So your life might be like, you've killed it for however many years. And it's been like, this is like, I've been no crisis coming at me. I'm just saying like, it is coming. And who are you going to be when it does? How are you preparing for it? What are you solidifying your life and your faith and your perspective around? Because here's what will happen anytime you go through crisis. You will reach for whatever you think has the answer. So sometimes people were like, oh, I'm going to reach for my community. Wonderful. That's amazing, right? Sometimes you might reach for something that's unhealthy. You might be like, I'm going to reach towards alcohol, towards addiction, towards drugs, towards sex, towards anger, towards things that like no, that's where you find, like, oh, that's where I'm going to find the answer. You'll reach to whatever you think the answer is. So when I said earlier about if you felt like your life fell apart in the midst of like going through some kind of crisis, in that moment you were reaching for whatever you thought would provide the answer. And sometimes the things we're reaching for are thinking, if I just could escape, right? If I could just escape, well, this thing will make me feel like I can escape. But it doesn't solve anything. And so it's like, who are we in crisis? Who are we right now? Like, is there crisis around us? Yeah, there is globally. Is it worse than it's ever been? I don't know. My guess is if you go back in time over generations, people are always like, this is the worst it's ever been. That's my guess. And maybe that's true, maybe it's not, I don't know. But it's like, who are we at moments like this? Who are we when things seem to go awry? Who are we? Like, who do we want to be when crisis hits? And so, like, just for a second, just think to yourself, who do I want to be when crisis hits? Who is it? Who do you want to be around, like, when someone else's crisis hits, like, what kind of person do you want to be for those people? So when Jesus teaches, like, we got to love the Lord with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and when we think about this idea of, to love our neighbor as ourselves, it's like, are we those people right now? When people start being like, can you believe what's happening in Israel? Can you believe what's happening in Iran? Can you believe what's going on in our economy? Can you believe what's happening with immigration? Can you believe, like, the death that's happening? Can you believe, like, whatever, in our city, whatever? It's like, who are you in those moments? Who are you relationally? Who are you in those moments? Like, what kind of vibe are you giving them? What kind of perspective are you giving them? Like, who are you and who do you want to be? What I'm not interested in with like conversations like this is like a debate about the Middle East. I am not a Middle Eastern expert, and guess what? Neither are you. You probably wouldn't be sitting here if that were the case, right? Like maybe there's someone in here that is. All right, so 99.9% of us are not experts on the Middle East, okay? I'm not interested in a political debate. I'm not interested in like, hey, this would like fix our city in a heartbeat. Like I don't necessarily know. I'm not interested in talking about the end times, y'all. Okay, you shouldn't be either. You know why? Because Jesus told us not to. And so often, like people are like predicting, like, this is the end times. This is what I'm like. They've been saying that for 2,000 years. Will someone be right sometime? Yes. All right. What's also interesting about all of that time is like most people that talk about end times seem to be operating out of fear. And so it's like, well, fear is not our future. And so it's not about any of that. What I am interested in is like, who am I in the time of crisis? What I am interested in is who are we in crisis? Who are we in our city in crisis? Who are we when we see injustices? Who are we when the world around us seems to be fracturing? Who are we when people are hurting around us? Are we people providing hope? Are we people providing joy? Are we people providing peace and perspective along with us? Like, are we preparing ourselves for that? Because in crisis, our vision is exposed. Our character is exposed. What we think is the answer is exposed. One of the questions I wrote down this week was this. Do I actually believe the way of Jesus works? How we respond to times of crisis actually provides the answer for us. Do I really believe it works? I wrote down a bunch of things that Jesus said just in one of his sermons, and I want you to just hear me read them, and they'll be up on the screen too. It's like, does this actually work? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You are the light of the world. Let your yes be yes, and your no be no. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. You cannot serve both God and money. Do not worry about your life. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. Do to others what you would have them do to you. By their fruit you will recognize them. Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Do those work? That's the question. It's like, do any of them actually work? So to say that we are a follower of Jesus, if you're not a follower of Jesus in this room, you can be like, nah, it doesn't work. Whatever you want to say. But if you call yourself a follower of Jesus, do you really think those work? That's the question that's at play for us in time of crisis. In terms of who we want to be, how we want to respond, how we want to talk to other people about hope and peace and love and joy, and how to have perspective in a world around us that seems to be crumbling apart. It shapes how we show up for people who are hurting. It shapes how we think about what's transpiring globally or locally or personally. It shapes everything if we think it works. If we don't think it works, or if we say it works but then we act differently, then we come out and we present ourselves and show up in a way that's like, man, that doesn't sound like Jesus, look like Jesus, or act like Jesus. And so who do we want to be? Do we actually believe this stuff works? The things that Jesus were talking about, do we think these commands would reshape families and cities and situations and suffering and pain and injustices? Do we think it actually works? If we do, we then have to start asking ourselves, am I actually committed and dedicating my life to this or not? If not, we won't show up well in times of crisis. If not, we'll let algorithms just shape how we think. If not, we'll be the angry people, judging people, shouting people down. If not, we won't have perspective on what could possibly happen and be people that actually are optimistic and do have hope. So who are we in crisis? What's interesting is, we live in, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but we live in a very individualistic world. Did you know that? In the last 30 years, rugged individualism has been a part of American culture for a long time. And in the last 30 years, it's taken on a whole different shape and form, and in a not good way. And the idea that's really started to shape in the last 30 in particular is this idea of platforming ourselves and platforming our wants, our needs, our desires. And if we don't get what we want and need and desire, then we freak out about it. It becomes so individualistic that we're only consumed with what we want to put out there and making sure that all of our needs are met. We want to platform everything and anything that we do. That's why we take so many pictures and post them. And I get it. There's a connection on some level there, and I get it, but it's ultimately every ounce of data that we have shows how just not healthy any of it is. And so we begin to see all these things at play, and over the last 30 years, it's actually been crippling. So sometimes I just laugh when people are like, we're so advanced right now. I'm like, are we? Or I heard people mock generations before them, and I'm like, I don't know, man. They might have had it right with cords on their phones, right? And so you start seeing some of these things, and it's like, what do we really know, and what are we really buying into? But we're shaped by all of these things. When I was writing down some ideas about what happens in rugged individualism, here are some examples. We have transactional and fragile relationships. It's what can you do for me? Oh, you can't do anything for me? Fine, I'm out. And when you treat people in this way, and you go into a restaurant and you treat people in this way, guess what you will do to your friends? That same thing. You'll start treating people one of the reasons I think that it's hard for people to get into relationships isn't just because of social media. That's been part of it. But even if you're desiring deeper relationships and everything, it's because we've been raised so often in these transactional and fragile relationships. It becomes difficult to have conflict. It becomes difficult to work through hard times relationally. Another thing we'll see is poor mental health. A third thing that we'll see is addiction is normative. These are all things that are just so prevalent in our society because of individualism. We can't deal with nuance and complexity. Some of the stuff we see all the time, in larger organizations, it's man, it's just not that simple, and people can't handle that anymore. You got to be one way or the other. You see that all the time, and we have more pain. People have more pain. If you go back generations of time when life was more communal, when you look at data of people's life experiences, they actually experienced less pain in life because you had people. The biblical command of bearing one another's burdens was there. We have less freedom and autonomy, which is ironic. And then we're controlled by algorithms. I know you're not, but yes, you are. And yes, I am too. It's your feed is your feed, and it's knows you better than you know yourself. We can't submit to the wisdom of larger community. This stuff happens all the time. We would rather leave a community than submit to it. And so what happens in our faith and relationships in Christianity when we get into this place, I love this quote by Walter Brueggemann. He says this: the crisis in the U.S. church has almost nothing to do with being liberal or conservative. It has everything to do with giving up on the faith and discipline of our Christian baptism and settling for a common generic U.S. identity that is part patriotism, part consumerism, part violence, and part affluence. That's what happens. That's not loving the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind, and loving your neighbor as yourself. That's what starts to happen. When faced with, and by the way, he said that, not me, so you can't get mad at me. And so I was reading Dallas Willard, who's another pretty famous theologian, who talked a lot about discipleship and shaping people's perspective around what does it mean to have mature faith and an understanding of, hey, how do you weather crisis? How do you begin to understand when things begin to fall apart in your life, or it's not exactly the way you want it to be, or the world around you seems like it's crumbling even globally. They asked Dallas Willard, like, how can you tell like a Christian is mature in that? And he said this: it is nearly impossible to offend them. I'll be honest, y'all. Christians as a whole are pretty offendable right now. So it's like, where am I in this? Do I believe what Jesus said is true? Do I believe that what Jesus said works? Do I believe I can be the right kind of person in Christ? So what do we do? I love this passage in 2 Timothy 1. This guy named Paul is writing, he's one of the fathers of the early church, and he's writing these letters, and he's writing this letter to actually this really young guy named Timothy. He's probably a teenager, and Paul and Timothy is helping like form a church community. And as he's doing this, Paul writes these letters to him. And he wants him to see something like really significant about how do you lead in crisis? How do you love people really well? How do you help people see something like really beautiful? And so he writes this to Timothy. He says, I thank God whom I serve as my ancestors did, with a clear conscience. As night and day I constantly remember you in my prayers. Recalling your tears, I long to see you so that I might be filled with joy. There's something there, this deep level of friendship and intimacy there that's like, man, I remember our tears together. I remember being in crisis together, persecution together. Man, I can't wait to see you because I'm going to be filled with joy when that happens. So I'm reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded now lives in you also. So it's like, well, what's Paul actually doing? What's like really helpful for us to think about? Who do I want to be in crisis, and how can I love people really well during a season that we're in like this? Here's the first thing. Everyone needs intergenerational relationships. We harp on this a lot here at Hill City. Kara Powell, who is, she does a lot of work with, in particular, youth and teenagers, but she does a lot of research about relationships. And she said that in order for you to be a healthy person, you need a minimum of 5 intergenerational relationships. So they span different generations. If you don't have them, then like you can't be a healthy person. You can't have healthy outlook. You can't have healthy perspective. You can't have healthy friendships. And when I say intergenerational, is different than multi-generational. Multi-generational would just say, hey, this room is filled. We have multi-generational people here. It's like, it just means that we just have different generations. When we say intergenerational, it's like, no. We serve together. We're in relationship together. We're in discipleship together. We're learning together. It's like we're learning from each other. So there's actual relationship that's happening there. The essence of a deep community is one that you deeply need to learn from someone else. Actually, even in the Bible, it talked about this in the book of Exodus. One of the commands God gives people, gives the adults at that time, he's like, hey, I need you to keep teaching the generations behind you, your children, remind them of what happened before, so that there's this intergenerational relationship that begins to happen, and everyone starts appreciating one another in it, and does not forget what happened before them, but it's also learning to what's happening now. It's the essence of a beautiful, beautiful community. So we have different generations represented here. We don't have as many in this generation, but the silent generation, which would be 80 and up. We might only have like a couple, but who would that be in the room? You can just raise your hand. All right, Ron? Yes, all right, wonderful. Okay, wonderful. We've got boomers, which would be 60 to 79. How many guys? Just raise your hand. Wonderful. We've got the best generation, Gen X, 45 to 60. Raise your hand. All right. Millennials, you guys are 29 to 44. Who are you guys? All right, there we go. All right, real strong representation there. And we've got Gen Z, 13 to 28. Who are you all? All right. Gen Alpha, you should be in another room. There's like 13 and under. But that's a representation. So when you think about each generation, I'm not going to have you do this, but if I were to say to you, if I just hand the mic to you and I was like, hey, what do you think of the boomers? What would you say? What do you, yeah. Or to some of the older folks in the room, if I was like, hey, what do you think about the millennials? What would you say? What do you think about the Gen Zers? Or, everyone freaks about the Gen Xers. But like, what would you say about the Gen X people? And so it's like, how am I am I in relationships with people? Do I appreciate the beauty of their era? Do I appreciate maybe the challenges of their era? Do I appreciate, guess what? To the younger people in the room, are there some beautiful things your generation is doing? Absolutely. Are there some horrendous things? Absolutely. And they could do that for every single generation, to the silent generation, to the oldest generation in the room. There were some really good things that happened in your generation. No doubt. Were there some horrific things that happened? No doubt. That is every generation, every era of every time. And so, but the question is for us to be people when crisis hits, we need to appreciate and learn from one another. Sometimes you sit with people who've been through it already. Some people in older generations, and when stuff is happening right now that seems chaotic, you might talk to someone who's 80 years old and they might be like, I know. I remember when I was a kid, we went through, and guess what? It reshapes how you start to think, and guess what? Fear is not your future. You are. They've seen it and they know it. So we need intergenerational relationships. We need people who learn from one another. We need to be a community that's desperate for the flourishing of every single generation. When we talk about what's the next generation worth, we always say everything, right? It's a line we stole from Andy Stanley. Why do we say that? So for me, I'm a Gen Xer. When I think about, in particular, younger generations of Gen Alpha and Gen Z, I'm like, man, I want to do everything in my power as we're leading this church, for however long we lead this church, that we will do everything in our power to shape a beautiful church experience for the younger generations to see. And it's whatever it takes, however much money it takes, however much staff we need, whatever. It's that's what we want to do. In the same way, I look at some of the older generations and I'm like, man, how in the fourth quarter, however long the fourth quarter is, how can this be a beautiful experience and an understanding what church community is like, and they get to see what happens in the younger generations. They get to help shape the legacy of this community. Because here's what I know. At almost 49 years old, here's what I know. We didn't start all of this. We're building it on the shoulders of people that came before us. And so I want to appreciate that and honor that. And yeah, some older folks, there's some things that I'm glad we don't do anymore generationally. Great. But I also want to appreciate the beauty of the generations before us. It reshapes everything. I was thinking about Galatians 5 this week too, about when we start having this intergenerational community. It's really cool what starts to happen. When Paul talks about the fruit of the Spirit, there's something that comes out of us. We embody these things in times of crisis: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. When we are in that place, it's man, that's what comes out of us in crisis. And intergenerational communities shape all of that, because you experience the beauty of all of it. Lacey was listening to a podcast this week, and she said something that was so good from this podcast, and it talked about this. It said, do you want the trait or the state? In what they're saying, and they're talking about the fruit of the Spirit, it's do you want just the traits to occasionally be a person of peace, a person of love, a person of joy, or do you want to be in the state of it all the time? And in order to be in the state of it all the time, it's I want to be in the presence of God, but I want to be in the presence of God with the presence of a lot of people. And in intergenerational relationships, because we're experiencing it all so differently, and it reshapes who we are in crisis. And it allows us to engage in a very different way. The second thing and the last thing is this: we need to treat everyone with sacred worth. with sacred worth. When I say with sacred worth, I don't just mean in the womb, though I do mean that. I also mean all the way to the tomb. So from the womb to the tomb, it's like, how do we interact in crisis? How do we help people in crisis? How do we think about it in crisis? It's like, everyone is sacred. Every person is sacred. I was listening to the sniper that was credited with killing Osama bin Laden. And I listened to this conversation he was having. And he was having this conversation with another sniper, and they were talking about all their kills and their death. And this guy started sharing, he's having this life crisis, basically. Because he said this, he goes, all the people I've killed, and I've killed some people while lying in their beds next to their wives and in front of their kids, and I've done all these different things. And he's like, what if I had met them at a bar? Now I start wondering, were they funny? I start thinking about, if we were born in the same country, would we have been best friends? You start questioning all the things that he's done. And it's ironic because some stuff gets celebrated and it's all complicated. Like, it's so complicated. But I'm listening to these two guys talk, and they're not even talking about faith. They're just talking about like humanity. And what are they saying? I'm realizing right now the sacredness of humanity. And I'm struggling. But I wonder, I'm assuming there are no snipers in this room, but I'm wondering how often we don't treat people as sacred. How often we mock another grouping of people. How often we internally have this dialogue about another country, another set of people, whatever, that's like, man, that is foreign to what Jesus taught us. That's foreign to the way we're supposed to interact or how we're supposed to think. Even what's happened in Iran right now, just as an example, do you know in Iran right now has the fastest growing, like per capita percentage-wise, fastest growing Christian church in the world? Did you think, like when it's like, do you think about the sacred, I'm not thinking just sacred because they're Christians, I'm like, just about humanity. And I get it, it's complicated with governments and evil and all this. I get all that stuff. I'm just talking at a core level. How do we think about people? How do we engage? In Matthew 25, when Jesus is speaking, he says that, hey, we will be judged by our compassion. Every single person in this room will stand before Jesus at some point in time. He will judge us by our compassion, how we see other people. Did we see them as sacred? Or did we gossip? Or do we have like contempt or anger or judgment? What did it look like? I just wonder. When was the last time you were disappointed in your mindset towards someone else? Have you thought about that? And then, what did you do about it? It'll shape who we are in crisis. It'll shape how we see the world around us. It'll shape the things that we say. I'll ask the band to come back up. So are we in crisis right now more than ever? I really don't know. Are the end times coming? Technically today we're closer than we were yesterday. That is all I know. But what I really want us to desire to be is the right kind of people during times of crisis. I want us to be people of hope, people of goodness, people of gentleness, people of peace, people that bring about love, people that are able to share in conversation about the sacredness of the people you are talking about. Because that's transformative. I want us to be able to look at people with different ages and experiences and just value the sacredness of their years on this earth. It's transcendent. It's transformative. It changes everything. People like teenagers and college students and young adults and middle-aged people like myself and elderly folks are all looking for hope and purpose and like, who am I supposed to be in all of this? How am I supposed to think? Sometimes I even think as Christians, I'm like, man, we sing the song, How Great Is Our God. How many of you guys know that song? But do you actually believe it? He's like, how great is our God? Sing with me, how great. Right? And then he's like, you're the name above all names, right? And it's like, we can get into that, but it's, when crisis hits, is that what I actually believe? How great is my God? Or let's bomb the crap out of them. Or let's gossip about them. Or let's judge them. Or let's, whatever the negative connotation to any of it is. Or let's escape, or let's run, or let's whatever. Or is it, how great is our God? There's a difference. We're going to sing together about this idea of like what praise actually is. But before we do that, I actually want us to sing. You can just sit there, and we'll stand here in a minute, but these guys are going to lead us singing it, not me. A cappella, I just want us to sing How Great Is Our God together. And I want you to just pay attention to what you're saying, and then we're going to sing something together with the full band, but to just really hear it and hear each other say it and feel the weight of what the words actually are. Lamont, will you lead us in it?